A recent estimate found that 65% of children entering a primary school this year will end up working in careers that have not yet even been invented. Now, I believe we've got to learn both the cognitive and the non-cognitive skills as well as the specialised technical skills, and crucially, we to teach children and teach students how to learn so they can easily pick up new skills. Now, I also had a 5-year term as chairman of the Leaving Cert Applied part of the education, part of education. But it prompts me to ask some other broad questions about education. Do students learn in the same way? Do all students learn in the same way? Should we ignore international research on multiple intelligences? Do students learn best in isolation? Is one main method of written assessment dependable? And that's the way we've been teaching up to now. There must be better ways of doing that. We talk about lifelong learning, but could a strong signal be made to reflect the importance of lifelong learning? Could we number our school years from birth, not primary school, to underline the importance of the preschool years in development of a child? We must make it clear that the education cycle, and I think this is an important element, the education cycle doesn't begin at primary school, but actually begins at birth. I've got 2 recent grandchildren, and it's just so interesting to see what they're learning at a few months old. One of the most interesting messages in terms of educational focus is advocated by the World Bank. They say that education should focus on basic cognitive skills like reading, writing and communication until children are 17 or 18, and that vocational training should wait. Now, we're well aware in this country of the massive amounts of children who left school to go into trades, and they didn't have the skills to adapt when the economy changed, and Senator Rooney talked about that earlier. If we focus on basic skills, this will allow a flexible workforce, and an example of this is Poland, which uses this asset in the aftermath of the economic and the financial crisis. Their economy is growing, and a lot of experts put that down to their flexible workforce. I believe that there's a lesson for Ireland to be taken on board. I was delighted, Minister, that you talked about the guarantee, the youth guarantee, because the Committee on Jobs and Enterprise and Innovation come up with this, and they said we don't have to invent something new. It's already a good example of it is New Zealand, Austria, Sweden. They're already doing this youth guarantee, so we know how to do it. I think it's possible to do it on that basis. I believe there's a lot more that has been said here today that we can cover. One of the elements I'd love to stitch in very clearly is the importance of entrepreneurship, so that people are expected to do it themselves rather than all the time expecting somebody else to do it for them. I was delighted to hear Senator Darcy speak about the lack of use of facilities, particularly institutes of technology and others, that lie vacant so for all summer in many cases, and certainly all weekends in many cases. There must be better ways we can do this. I'm delighted to see you in the position you're in, Minister. I know that your heart's in the right place. Let's just make sure that we can support you in any way we can.
Margaret, Senator Kochkeen, you have 4 minutes.
4 minutes. I have to speak very fast, Minister. You're very welcome, because this is an area close to my heart. I actually, when Senator Quinn was speaking there, I did my Masters in Multiple Intelligences, so I'm after your own heart there. And Minister, I want to congratulate you on really, and the government has already commenced a great reform agenda in respect of further education and training to ensure that we future-proof the sector so that it can deliver a 21st century education and training programme. And you mentioned there the 2 pieces of legislation that has been published. So I'll actually skip on from that, because I think it's important that I get to say what I want to say, because what I think is traditionally acknowledged and assessed as intelligence, really, it suits the social dominant group, really, and they have largely defined what is legitimate knowledge in education and what is worth transmitting as education. I think this is basically what Senator Quinn was saying there, that very often the cultural values and the beliefs in education, societal structures, especially educational structures, mirror reflect the values of the dominant groups The exception is in adult education. And Minister, I hope it is preserved in adult education, and indeed what is in some of adult education today should be brought down to the bottom, to the primary level indeed. And I would say our educational system has left many of our adults behind and continues to fail many of our citizens, leaving them behind to figure it out for themselves. We must address the urgent social need behind the fact that not every one of our citizens learns in the same way, and that there should be a wider spectrum of intelligences catered for, and therefore a wider cohort of the population. We must, our philosophy really, to challenge the traditional view of intelligence, and we should have equal regard for other areas of intelligence. Well, it is very important that we put a great value on linguistic, logistical and mathematical intelligence, but what we must do is ensure that they're taught in a way that encompasses all of the intelligence of the person, and that we have equal regard for the dancers, the designers, the entrepreneurs, artists, musicians and whatever. And I just noticed a statement there, the VEC delivers further education while FOSS delivers training. I think they should be both encompassed together in a multiple intelligence sphere, to say there's no difference between training and education. Both are education. And we should aid the students in critical and creative thinking competencies and encourage intellectual empowerment. And maybe if we had that when the Magdalen Laundries was there, if we had more critical thinkers educated around looking and seeing why and questioning, this may not, and it wouldn't have happened, or wouldn't have happened as much. So critical thinking and intellectual empowerment in education and in adult education as well. And adult education looks to do that at the moment, and hopefully with those two bodies that will be nurtured. And Senator Zapone there spoke about a very important sector of the community and voluntary sector, and that definitely has to be looked at as a model for what is happening there. If you look at the, well, I call it the Shanty programme, but I'm cuss on now. What it is delivering there, I think it should be used as a model for the new SOLAS education and adult education as well. And I just want to concentrate, I'm working at the moment on with architects and how architects are trained, and look at, is university training of architect better than a vocational training and all this. I think the APL, an accredited prior learning and education, has to be developed further, and this is an ideal opportunity now in the education boards under SOLAS to look at APL and see for accredited prior knowledge. What the person brings with them through lifelong learning should be accredited, and a full system brought in there. And I think architects is one thing that we could look at in doing there. It would take it a little while to put it in place, but training on the job, learning by doing, is just as good as learning out of the books. And I want, Minister, if you would look at that aspect of education and ensure that there is a methodology put in place for all sectors of education that would ensure that this comes. But I'm working at the moment with, because we're doing the draft building regulations, and I think it is an ideal opportunity that we could look to this for, as well as a university education, to have it through the vocational sector and through the community sector indeed, and develop education more in that way. And the personal experiences, I would say, I have more to say, but I know Cahir, look, you're nodding at me there that my time is up. But we'll come back to this again, and I'll have more to say on that. Thank you, Minister, and well done on the job you're doing there yourself and Minister Quinn in the change in education. Thank you.
Gormagat, Senator Brino O'Donnell. 4 minutes.
Well, I'm just pleased to have an opportunity as well to say a few words on this issue today. I think it's a very important subject, the whole issue of further education and training, particularly in the current climate, given the fact that there are so many people unemployed, people that would have had skills in an industry, perhaps that now there's no jobs in that industry. We think of the construction industry, for example, where many people would have left college or school to go working in that industry. They fell out of education due to the fact that there was a more handsome living to be made at the time, I suppose, or more money available in a sector which was creating employment and opportunities at the time. And those people now find themselves, very many of them, in limbo. And the vast majority of those people, of course, are young men. And unfortunately, many of them are either here at home, unemployed, trying to get into a course of choice, or indeed abroad working. And that's the sad reality of, I suppose, part of the Celtic Tiger and the construction industry boom. But we're just listening to some of the debate, and I would totally subscribe to what Senator Fergal Quinn said in relation to a full holistic approach in relation to the manner in which education is centred, focused on the participant, but also forward thinking in relation to where we are going as a country over the next 20 to 30 years. I think we have to ask ourselves that question. We have to ask ourselves what type of jobs will be available in 10, 15, 20 years' time. And for too long, and we spoke about FOSS, and I was often critical of the educational element of FOSS because it was a kind of a knee-jerk reaction type education course, and when long after the construction sector was finished, there were still stone building and block building and plastering courses available for young men, and there was no change happening within the organisation. And I think that we have to, as a nation, as a country, and the government, on behalf of the people, has to look at what's coming down the tracks and what way we should plan ahead for that. And Senator Quinn is absolutely right in relation to starting at preschool, primary school, into secondary school. And we have to look at issues like language. And there are Irish people applying for jobs now and not being called for interviews simply because they don't have the correct language or skills on their CV. That's something that has to be looked at. The ICT skills, the whole issue of communication skills, and all that revolves around that. The issue of multimedia. We're now living in a multimedia society. For example, all of the website browsing done on web at the moment, 54% of it is done from your mobile phone. The day of sitting behind the computer desk is adapting and changing, and that will continue to evolve, and there will become job opportunities from that new technology in the years ahead. And there should be a kind of a technology hub within SOLAS, and particularly, and they're geared with the policy element of driving this agenda, and then you've got the educational and training boards on the second piece of legislation, and they're going to drive the training and the education. But there has to be a forward-thinking policy unit within SOLAS, looking at what's coming down the tracks and being able to adapt to that and plan ahead on a 5, 10 and 15-year plan, and even a 20, 30-year plan in the longer term. In relation to career guidance, vitally important area. Many kids at secondary level, and even people that find themselves out of work now, many young adults, they need support in relation to career guidance. And unfortunately, the career guidance hours have been drastically cut in second level education. And my view on that is it was never more important to have career guidance at second level as it is now, because the people coming out and doing traditional courses at second or third level, you know, they need that help now. They need to be able to get help from a professional career guidance teacher, and I think that was certainly a step that should be reversed.
Yes.
I have a lot of points here, and I may forward them to the Minister again, but I mean, for example, the Pathways to Work document, which was adopted by the government, published by the government, focuses on the labour activation measures. It doesn't take into consideration, for example, the accessibility and the quality of job placements, things like guidance and counselling services, the relevance and quality of training and the education programmes that are available, the soft skills, and the soft skills are more, you know, what can be given, what can be provided through guidance and counselling services, and that's important to young people. They need to be equipped with, you know, equipped with skills in that area, and also, you know, what I've touched on in relation to the root and branch need of a review of the courses that are currently available. There are 270,000 people, as I understand it, undertaking courses at the moment within FOSS and within community and within private operations at the moment across the further education FTE courses. Now, a lot of those courses are indeed very good, but a lot of the individuals who are undertaking those courses do not want to be in those courses, and the courses that they want to be in are full or are not available. And I think that, you know, and obviously there's going to be an opportunity now with the new structures that are going to be put in place, but it has to be adaptable, it has to be forward thinking, and the courses of relevance to people who want to participate on them need to be made available. And I think that if there's private providers out there, they need to be adaptive as well, and if there's funding going to be made available to private, I'll finish on this, Chairman. if there's funding going to be made available by the educational training boards to private providers, those private providers also have an obligation to provide adaptive, forward-thinking courses. I may send you on some details, Minister, on a few points, but Gormai with the card.
Senator Hayden, 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Laska Hirlach. I'd like to welcome the Minister to the House. One of the points I'd like to make is that when I started looking at the literature, leading up to this debate, I was quite surprised, actually, by the extent and the importance of the further education and training sector. I mean, it's worth 900 million euros per year. There are some approximately 270,000 places in part-time and full-time equivalent courses. There are 4 full-time further education courses, further education courses, and 5 part-time courses. I mean, in total, we're looking at 9 programs and in the region of 192,741 participants. So it's a very, very important sector of our economy. But one of the things I suppose that I was most surprised by was not just the range of programs and the numbers participating, but the value for money. It was really quite surprising to see that in 2012, provision under Youth Reach was 70 million for 3,700 places. And under the Vocational Training Opportunities Scheme, it was 80 million spent in 2012 for 6,000 places. Now, in my opinion, that represents a very good value for money. But I suppose, the issue before us today is to accept the realities. And a lot of these courses grew like layers of an onion, one on top of the other. And in relation to FOS, I think we will have to accept that FOS has been a damaged brand, and it was necessary for confidence in the whole area of training that FOS needed to move on into another existence. The other point that I was struck by was that during the Celtic Tiger years, unemployment remained stubbornly high, in spite of the fact that the economy never had it so good. So there's a serious issue there for us in terms of our further education and training, in terms of its effectiveness, and in terms of its reach. And, if it wasn't achieving that reach when times were good, I think we have to look strategically at how it can achieve that reach when times are not so good. I also fully accept what other speakers have said, particularly Senator Quinn, in relation to the challenges facing modern society. I was struck, for example, by a book I read authored by Charles Handy, The Empty Raincoat, a number of years ago, where he basically said that going forward, people would have to deal with the idea of a portfolio of careers, that the job for life was gone, the idea that you could stay in one occupation even with different employers was gone, and that we all had to be a lot more adaptable. But I suppose really I want to address a couple of remarks to you, Minister, in relation to the further education part of this debate, and to say that if you look at the statistics, while this country, and people are constantly applauding it, boasts a very high overall skills profile in the context of those of our school leavers who participate in higher education, we can be rightly proud of the high participation rate. The CSO, that masks an underlying difficulty. The CSO shows that 52% of the population over 18 have not achieved more than a secondary school education. And our universities and ITs have a weaker adult education profile than, for example, their UK counterparts. And I think that further education has a critical role to play in addressing this problem. And, we're all aware, and I think part of the difficulty, and really what I'm trying to get at, is the further education sector in Ireland is more fragmented and marginal than it is, for example, in the UK, and that the areas that are covered under further education in this country come under a number of other umbrellas, whereas in the UK you have specialist further education colleges. And as a result, I think our sector is weaker and less able to compete and engage with employers. So I would just like to say, one final thing, Minister, and it relates to the move to integrate FOS and the VECs under the umbrella of Solace, which I think is to be very much welcomed. But I put it to you that rather than running the whole provision through a centralised agency with little local accountability, which I would be concerned about, or responsiveness, consideration should be given to the structure of Solace and to structure it through the establishment of local autonomous bodies with their own locally appointed boards. And I think this is critical to real engagement with local employers and communities. Thank you.
Senator Riley, you have 4 minutes.
Gormagat. First of all, I'd just like to join my colleagues and welcome Minister Cannon to Challenge Day for this important debate on the future of further education and training. And we all know that investment in education and training is always is going to be vital for the economy and for society in general. And I suppose it is more important now during times of recession. Addressing people's skills deficits, improving people's employability, empowering people to move from forms of employment such as construction into new areas of job growth need to be the absolute priority. We need to make sure that every single cent of additional money provided to us by external sources such as the EU are used for the intended purpose, ensuring that there is additional benefit that such funds do bring to those in need of support. I know some speakers earlier mentioned that they had concerns, and I would share concerns in the reduction of overall expenditure for the further education sector and the difficulties experienced as a result of that. I know the CE scheme doesn't fall under the Minister's portfolio, but just it in itself provides a vital bridge for many people, especially in those areas with high unemployment and social disadvantage. And I know there had been a partial reversal of the cuts from Budget 2012, but the net reduction in the expenditure has created real problems. And the same can be said, for example, for the PLC courses and the 13.2 million cuts to the VE sector. I know the impact of the increase in the pupil-teacher ratio from 17 to 19 not only affects teaching jobs, but it's also going to have a real impact on the training provided. I think it's a cut that's impossible to justify. I don't think it acknowledges that the Irish education sector isn't a one-size-fits-all system, and these courses themselves provide an important educational platform for those who want to advance onto university or ITs. And I know the Leaving Cert examination is considered a minimum qualification in Ireland, yet the majority of adults in the state don't actually have this certificate. So that's where the further education sector and the importance of that can't be overstated. And many learners who do benefit from PLC courses are mature students who are returning to formal education after a considerable period of time, and that means that they do need additional and specific supports to make the transition back to full-time education, particularly in order to enhance literacy and numeracy skills, which are essential for future employment prospects. So not only will the changes in the pupil-teacher ratio at PLC result in the loss of teaching jobs, it's going to bring an end, an enforced end, to a lot of specialised courses that will be seen as essential for the reskilling of adult learners through further education. I know in your speech, Minister, you did make reference to the European Globalisation Fund, and I would have concern with the mismanagement that had happened with the European Globalisation Fund. I know you yourself have been hands-on with the fund and with it, but there was serious questions around it and the way the fund has been managed. I would be interested in receiving an update from yourself on the total funds that are actually due to be returned from the state, from all of the now closed projects, including the programme for redundant construction workers. Yeah, I'd like to also just maybe hear some of your comments on the concerns that the money that has been spent, whether for Waterford Crystal, or Technics or redundant construction workers, was used to subsidise pre-existing supports for these workers rather than for providing tailor-made additional interventions as the rules of the fund require. And finally, again, just elaborating on or just touching on something you mentioned in your speech in terms of youth guarantee. I know the Minister, the Taoiseach, made great play last week of the agreement with the €6 billion European Youth Unemployment Fund in the conclusion of the budget negotiations. Can you outline, Minister, what investment the government intends to make to match the small EU allocation, and can you give a commitment that this money will be additional rather than taking out of already existing programme funding already?
The Minister is due back at 5:02, so Senator Conway, do you want to? I'll give you 2 minutes.
I won't delay.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of what I would want to say has already been
Sweet like a donkey.
has already been articulated. Alaska here, but there's one particular issue in terms of, and I want to commend the Minister, and certainly in terms of how he's dealing with the whole solace issues and so on. But I was at an international conference in Austria over the weekend, which specifically dealt with the situation where people with disabilities are finding themselves unemployed throughout the world, but particularly in Europe. And there's a serious problem with graduates with disabilities getting a fair crack at a whip at interviews. And we saw last week where the Epilepsy Society had carried out a survey where 1 in 2 employers would not give a job to somebody who has epilepsy, which is absolutely appalling in this day and age that happens. And furthermore, that 1 in 5 in society felt that people with epilepsy were being stigmatised because of their condition. Now, that's just one. If the same survey was carried out in other areas of disability, I have no doubt that the figures would reflect exactly the same. This is a pan-European problem, but there's absolutely no reason why this country can't become best practice in terms of dealing with it, and in terms of ensuring that people with disabilities have the same opportunities once they have proven that they have the ability and the skill set to do a job, that the disability side of it then does not hinder them at interview or indeed securing the job. There's no point in us as a country looking for international best practice because, in my view, quite frankly, it's not there except in the United States. So we need to set international best practice. And as a nation, I think the vast majority of our people believe in equality. But yet, seeing this on the ground materialise in what I consider a basic human right, the right to work, and the right to pay your taxes and to contribute in society, this is not manifesting itself within society. So your department, Minister, has a critical role to play in ensuring that people with disabilities who are capable of acquiring the skills set get the opportunity to do just that. And I think that we need to see very focused, tailor-made programmes to deal with this epidemic, and that's all it can be described as, an epidemic. I mean, there's a lot of people with disabilities in so-called sheltered employment and internships and all of that. All that's doing is making the figures look good. If we're to throw it out on the table and open it up, I'll tell you that you would be frightened at the statistics of unemployment within the disability community.
Thank you. Minister, 5 minutes to respond.
Thank you, Gormagat. As a former member of this House, I was often concerned the fact that a minister would come in here, deliver an opening address, then supposedly listen intently, and then deliver a closing address and not address any of the issues that were raised during the contribution. So I want to try as best I can not to allow that to happen in this instance in 5 minutes. There were a number of common themes emerging and threads across the discussion, so if I don't mention your own contribution individually, please don't feel slighted. One of the reasons that this process of reform is underway in bringing together our further education and training sectors is to be able to leverage the very significant existing skill sets that exist in both sectors. Decades of experience, thousands of hours of teaching and training expertise that haven't been used to their best effect in the past. There's no question about that. And a lot of the word duplication was mentioned over and over again. That has been very much the case. There has been duplication ongoing. That's a waste of state resources, valuable state resources. It's a waste of people's time. And one of the things we have to convince, I suppose, is the people that we want to encourage to get back into the learning process is that the intervention we are going to provide them with is going to be a very, very worthwhile one. That it's not just, as somebody said, punching the numbers, getting them in, getting them back out, and not really caring what the overall outcome of the process is. So it is bringing together those different strands. And Senator Saboni mentioned the community sector. I have, at this point in time, I'd say, visited at least 30 to 40 different community education projects across the country, and there's significant expertise as well at community level, which more often not is given on a voluntary basis through the goodwill and the passion of people who have skills and who want to impart those skills to others. And I think it's bringing together all those different strands, the further ed sector, the work that FOSS has been doing, the community sector, and indeed the private sector, who are also doing exceptional work. And in fact, most of the recent 6,500 places through the Momentum programme are being provided by the private sector, because in the past the private sector has had that flexibility, and I compared it in a recent piece in one of the national newspapers that FOSS is like a behemoth of an ocean liner, and the new structure we're trying to create will be the ETBs moving powerboat-like to different areas that need to be urgently addressed in terms of skills shortages. The private sector have been very, very good at that in the past because they're small, tightly controlled units capable of moving quickly to address a particular skills shortage. So we're going to bring together all those strands, and the best of every one of those strands will be coming together to make things work better, essentially, for the people that we want to support. Senator Hayden, I think it was, mentioned the fact that we need to have that kind of flexibility at regional level, and we most certainly will. That's why I made the point in my contribution that Solace will not be, as an entity itself, providing any training or further education opportunities. It will be charged with ensuring that the ETB structure, all the 16 ETBs across the country, will have the skills and the resources and the support to deliver training and education locally. So now there will be some significant national research going on. I think the Senator O'Donnell mentioned that we need to be looking forward 10, 15, 20 years. Yes, Solace will be doing that, and will have a dedicated research unit, and as FOSS already does, to be honest, to do that kind of work, looking at where the skills shortages are emerging. And Senator Quinn mentioned the fact that 65% of primary school children now entering primary school, that the careers they will take up, having left our system, don't even exist yet. I saw a piece in a magazine yesterday that there are now 300,000 people in the US employed, in the US alone, writing apps for iPhones and iPads. So, and I read in a magazine last week that by 2025, half the careers that exist then don't exist now. So that constantly emerging, innovating jobs market, we have to be able to respond to it. So Solace will do that research at national level, but the ETBs will also be required to research at regional level to see where exactly, and drill right down in a very granular fashion to establish where the skills shortages are occurring in our own region. So, for example, where I live in Galway, there's a huge emerging medical devices cluster. And in fairness, FOSS and the VECs are actually working now at this point in time, long before Solace even comes into being, to be able to respond to those skills shortages. You see similar things happening in the pharmaceutical and food sciences area down in Cork, and in financial services here in Dublin. So we need to be that speedboat-like model that can move quickly to respond to skills shortages as they occur, and not be running behind the curve. We should be actually ahead of the curve all the time. Senator Quinn spoke very eloquently about the whole subject of entrepreneurship, and I agree with him wholeheartedly. And as well as teaching the subject of entrepreneurship to our children and indeed to our our adults, I think we need to be somehow interweaving the concept of entrepreneurship across all of our educational provision. And I spoke last week to a very successful businessman based in County Clare, County Galway actually, who said to me that when he was in Leaving Cert, there was a questionnaire about what career you wish to pursue when you left school, and it was a questionnaire submitted by the teacher, and they had all had to respond to it. And he put down, and his answer was, "I want to be a businessman." And the teacher handed it back to him and said, "That's not a career." You know, and that kind of mindset urgently needs, and I think it is changing, to be frank. But we need those kind of skills you need to become a successful entrepreneur: critical thinking, team working, analytical skills, being able to see opportunities where others don't see them. And as the phrase Senator Quinn used, and others use it as well, learning to learn. That needs to be very much part of all our educational provision, right from the junior infants all the way through to PhD. And we're trying hard to do that now, to interweave that. And one of the reasons you mentioned there were students in Dundalk IT coming from all over the world to study entrepreneurship. One of the reasons they are coming, because they're coming to other institutes as well. I was out in DCU last week saying goodbye to 15 Malaysian teachers who had come from the Malaysian education system to study entrepreneurship in Ireland. We are leading the way globally in this area, and we're doing exceptionally good work in many areas in it, but we need to do an awful lot more of it. Solace is about bringing together all of our expertise, all of our history of wonderful history of education in the different sectors, and then using that expertise to provide people with a clear, unambiguous transition, seamless transition all the way through the education system, so that they can see a definitive path for themselves from the moment they enter right until the very end, where they hopefully re-emerge and take up sustainable, long-term and very satisfying, rewarding careers. I also agree with Senator Darcy when he said that as well as those that are unemployed, those who are employed need to be equally careful about keeping their own skills up to date, and again we need to be able to facilitate that through the process. We will talk an awful lot more about this when the ETB and Solace legislation comes back into the Houses again. But one thing I want to say at the very, very end is, as a small island nation off the coast of Europe, we sometimes tend to think that we need to look elsewhere for inspiration about how to do things properly. Scandinavia is often mentioned as being a wonderful model, or Austria or Germany. I genuinely think if we pull all the strands together, and all the talent we have and the passion that I've seen in this sector over the last 2 years together, and really make it gel and make it work well, we can become the model that others aspire to and others look to for inspiration. I think we have a lot of work to do. It's very important work, and I look forward to working with you to make it happen. Thank you.
Very good. That concludes that business. Would the acting leader move to suspend the sitting until...
I would ask that the House be adjourned until 4 p.m.
The House stands suspended until 4 p.m. Thank you. Very good.